I want to tell you a story about storytelling. What I was always taught to do was to throw features and benefits at the customer, hoping that they would catch a few of them. And as they did, they would begin to realize what a wonderful company I had and what a wonderful product I had for them. And most of the time it didn't work. On those occasions where I did close a sale that way, I did it because I found a way through conversation to make a bond with the buyer, to help them realize that they could trust me with a purchase. But it wasn't anything about throwing things at the wall, the features. We have the best thing. It has the best features. It has the best outcomes. And that's all I was taught to talk about. I began to weave stories into my sales presentation, and I found that I closed more sales when I did. When I talked about someone who was in a similar situation as the buyer, and they tried my services and they triumphed, that made an impact on the buyer. They began to say, yeah, I'd like one of those too, please. When I began to use stories at the front end in my prospecting, I would call a suspect. I would tell them a story about a need that I knew they had and how that need had been met. And at the end of the story, I invited them to get what the hero of the story got. And many times they said, yes, I'd like that. I wish someone else would have described that to me. I'm glad you did. Let's talk. So as I began to weave more stories into my selling process, I began to sell more. And I began to sell at higher margins because the conversation went far from features and benefits. As I applied stories to different parts of my selling process, those parts got better. So then I began applying storytelling to every part of my selling process. I used it in prospecting. I used it in qualifying. I used it to learn needs. I used it to make my presentation. I used it to handle objections. And I used it to close. Afterwards, I used it to follow up for cross-sells, for upsells, and for customer referrals. They worked everywhere because I told stories that were about the buyer. I created a hero that the buyer identified with. I took the hero through a difficult journey. They triumphed the same way the buyer wanted to triumph. And at the end of the presentation, I closed the sale. I used many fewer features and benefits. I used more stories about people overcoming challenges and triumphing. And when I did that, I sold more and I sold at higher margins. That's how storytelling can help you.